What is the prevalence of steroids and PEDs in the NBA? Well, according to Furious George, that would be George Karl in the name of his new book, the association needs to take them a lot more seriously. And here's an excerpt from his new book. It's obvious some of our players are doping. How are some guys getting older, yet thinner and fitter? How are they recovering from injuries so fast? Why the hell are they going to Germany in the off-season? I doubt it's for the sauerkraut. More likely it's for the newest, hard-to-detect blood boosters and PEDs they have in Europe. I think we want the best athletes to succeed, not the biggest, richest cheaters employing the best scientists. So guys, is Karl right about PEDs in the NBA? Will?
I think he is. I think it would take an astounding amount of naivety to believe there's not PEDs in the NBA. You can go with very superficial evidence. You can just say, look at the players today versus the players 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Look at the size difference. We're looking at superhuman players, not just in height, but in muscle tone, in mass, in weight, in athleticism. Look at guys playing longer into their career, later into their 30s. These are things that don't just happen. Yes, human beings get faster with time. Track times go down. Times in the swimming pool go down. We generally do improve, but not at that kind of rate. But here's the biggest argument for why there's PEDs in the NBA. Show me a sport, and I'll show you a dirty sport. Show me a sport with money, incentive. Never underestimate the power of incentive. The incentive right now in the NBA is too great. They're handing out $10 million contracts, $15 million contracts to guys that are 7th on the bench, 8th on the bench. This league is flush with money. When that's the case, there are players dying, willing to cheat, to be a part of it. You can guarantee it. And it has nothing in that respect to do with basketball, any sport, any game of life for that matter. With that much money involved, people are going to be willing to cheat to get there. TJ Quinn, one of the best investigative reporters for ESPN for Outside the Lines, has said drug tests are not really drug tests. They're intelligence tests. Anyone with a modicum of intelligence, the slightest ability, can pass a drug test. If you pass simple rules, if you know when to take them, when to flush them, when it's coming, you can do it. The guys that get busted are the dumb ones, the ones that cannot follow the rules. You cannot tell me that the NBA is different than every other sport, that somehow baseball is dirty, the Olympics are dirty, but the NBA is clean. The NBA is dirty like every other sport where the incentives are high. And if you doubt me, ask O.J. Mayo, Rashard Lewis, Darius Miles, Don McClain, and a host of others who've already been busted for PEDs.
There's a lot of generalities in what you just said. There are nothing but generalities in what George Karl said. And it's hard for me to address George Karl because when he's here, I did a lot of NBA shows, and personally, I like him a lot. Where I come from in this particular instance in rebuttal to you is I am the only person at ESPN that's ever worked for another big entertainment company that has been accused for years, for decades, of abusing PEDs and or steroids. You have to be careful when you're saying steroids as a blanket statement and a blanket word and says there's a problem with steroids in the NBA. Steroids do not help you play in the NBA. They would hinder you. Now, do certain people use PEDs? Absolutely. Do certain people use HGH? Okay. I'm a big proponent of if you are hurt, I want to see the best players be able to play. And if HGH can help you recover to get back to playing, I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is a coach writing a book and saying there's an issue with steroids as if every single thing underneath it is a steroid, and you're saying that guys are abusing them using generalities. If you want to throw this out there, George Karl, then give me specifics. Tell me you saw somebody in the locker room using steroids. Tell me you saw somebody buying steroids and you have facts. He has no facts, and what they came out with, at least probably the publisher, was these quotes so we would talk about them so people would buy this book. You have a lot of facts with what you're saying, But there's a lot of generalities, too, because there aren't people, other than occasionally like a TJ Quinn, going to where it actually happens. And I don't think, and I guarantee you, that steroids do not help a basketball player in what they need to do.
Okay, but to be clear, you take an issue with how George Karl said what he said.
Correct.
But do you think he's wrong?
Yes.
Do you think there is not a PED problem in the NBA?
No, he said the headline was steroids, and then you go into it.
Limit to steroids?
I do not think there's a PED
He said
problem.
PEDs and Let me clear. He said PEDs and steroids.
Let me understand. Let me understand.
It's obvious some players are doping, so that kind of falls under.
Right, and he's talking about going over and getting the spin cycle blood and everything of that nature. If you're using PEDs and he said drug problems, painkillers and that, I was around all of that. I used a lot of painkillers in my day because we were wrestling 4 or 5 days a week. You cannot function at a high level if you are abusing these type of drugs week in and week out. And guys that I've been around lost their jobs because they could not function.
But I would
to
say
play in the NBA,
prescription pills aren't necessarily doping.
I'm talking about all of it.
Okay,
PEDs,
let me,
if you're using it, it's going to affect how you operate as an athlete and an individual.
Okay, so
you can't maintain in the NBA.
Let me respond, and I'm going to be clear about what I'm debating here. The question I'm answering is whether or not George Karl is right or wrong. I'm not debating whether or not people should be allowed to use PEDs, whether or not it's helpful. We've had that conversation at various times on different programs. It's a completely different conversation. The question right now is whether or not George Karl is right. Many people mocked Jose Canseco when he wrote his book the first time, suggesting the steroids were rampant in baseball.
Okay.
Jose Canseco got the last laugh. He was right. Now, George Karl, you're right, is making generality. He's not being specific. But that also doesn't mean, Coach, that he's wrong. There's
a huge difference between baseball and basketball.
Fine.
Huge difference.
Fine.
And it will help you in baseball.
He didn't limit
it doesn't help
steroids.
you in basketball.
He didn't limit steroids. This would include HGH, EPO, anything that would help you recover. And if you're telling me that basketball is somehow exempt or clean or free from all these things...
It's not a problem. It's not a problem.
It would make
a few instances...
It'd make it the only sport on earth, then.
That it's not a problem?
Yes.
There's not rampant use?
The only high-level sport, yes.
This sport is so much different in how you prepare as opposed to football and or baseball. And to say that guys are abusing it...
What does the word abuse mean? What does that mean? You keep saying
using too much in order to cheat, in order to play. If you're using HGH... There's a lot of people out there that can dope.
Honestly, it's not about abuse. It's against the rules. You're either using it or you're not.
He said you're abusing it. He said there is a problem.
No, he said
I don't believe there's a problem. And unless you give me more than 2 or 3 names, like George Karl does not do, you can't write a book and then not give me names. If you're saying there's a problem, then you've seen it.
I'd be careful with that position. I mean, just like Jose Canseco.
I'd be
George
careful,
Karl
but I'm not writing a book.
George Karl will have the last laugh.
I'm not writing a book. If you're gonna say this, you have to go all the way. The one thing I know about writing a book, if you're gonna write it and you're gonna accuse people of this, you better have facts to back it up.
He hasn't accused anyone. He's saying it's a problem in the NBA. Is he wrong?
That's accusing a lot.
That's not indicting. That's not indicting.
Absolutely.
Just to clarify, though,
it absolutely is.
Just to clarify, though, he never said it was a problem. He just said it's obvious some players are doping. So he's not saying
now you're saying it's semantic.
But
you guys are making my argument for me.
My argument's very simple. He's not wrong.
You cannot come.
He's not wrong.
But you haven't given me any examples to show me that he's right.
You're right. It's circumstantial. It's circumstantial. And I will win this argument over time.
Time will definitely tell. I love those outtakes. Hilarious. Yep, the countdown is on. We are now less than a week away from First Take's big move to ESPN. Stephen A., Max, and Molly will be back on Tuesday with a live performance from Wale featuring a very special guest. We will also have other stars, including Ice Cube and Hall of Famer Jim Kelly. So please be sure to tune in as First Take goes from E2 to E1 on January 3rd.
Well, I certainly do. I think that when you think about where we've come from with, I'm not going to say arguably the same personnel, but you do have a lot of the same personnel, to be trite. And then the way that he has taken this staff and taken the team in general with the talent we have and basically got it in a position to compete better than anybody going into the NFL postseason. All of that ought to give a big plus for him in the vote.
Well, we know what Cowboys owner Jerry Jones thinks about who should be the 2016 NFL Coach of the Year. Even though he is a little biased, it's kind of hard to argue with Jason Garrett's 13-2 record. And he's doing it with a rookie QB and a rookie running back. So we heard what Jerry thinks, but I'm interested in what you guys think. Who should be the NFL Coach of the Year?
Well, let me be clear. Jason Garrett should be second. So it's not like, I mean, we're just kind of just separating very little things here. But I will say this. Jason Garrett, all he did was kind of get out of the way. You've got a great team. You luck into a quarterback who's going to be probably a Hall of Famer down the line, and you get out of the way. What Bill Belichick continues to do in New England is nothing short of remarkable. And I am not a Patriots fan. Most of them drive me nuts because they've been good for so long, and we all know how that goes. And they're just the opposite of a Cowboys fan because they have a reason to be arrogant and confident because they won so many times and they win so much. He missed his quarterback the first 4 games, and they still won 3 games, right? So he loses his all-pro tight end, Gronk, and they say, you know what? Instead of throwing it to him all the time, how about we spread it around to 8 or 9 guys? He wins with whoever they put out there. And, oh, by the way, they get rid of an all-pro linebacker, and they send him to Cleveland, and they say, just to prove a point. Just to prove a point. This guy is by far at 13-2. Are you serious? With that team, with those guys that you probably can't name half of them, to me it should be hands down Bill Belichick is the NFL Coach of the Year.
So Bill Belichick is Coach of the Year because he has shown he can win with substitute players, players that come in for others that are injured, with a variety of different players. That is why Bill Belichick
I said
is
with
Coach
anyone. I didn't call them substitute players. I said with anyone. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That's the argument?
Yes, 13-2.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes.
Here's why. That's all the reasons that Jason Garrett wins it above Bill Belichick. I'm sympathetic to your Bill Belichick argument. I don't think it's a terrible argument. I think it's the LeBron James effect. LeBron James is the MVP every year. When you indulge other people, it's just because you got bored, just because you wanted to look for some variety, but it's still LeBron. It was always Jordan. Now it's always LeBron. That's the truth. Belichick is in that fold a little bit. He should be in the top 2 or 3 every year in Coach of the Year. He is an amazing, probably the greatest coach of all time. But this isn't his year. And the reasons that you just laid out are the reasons Jason Garrett is Coach of the Year. He has played this season at various times without his star all-pro left tackle in Tyron Smith, without his star defensive end in DeMarcus Lawrence, without his top cornerback in Mo Claiborne. He didn't have Rolando McClain the whole year. And then the coup de grace. Bill Belichick wins when Tom Brady's out for 4 games. Jason Garrett wins when Tony Romo is out the entire season. Let us not forget that Dak Prescott started this year as the 3rd-string quarterback. Jason Garrett, regardless of how good Dak proved to be, and Garoppolo proved to be pretty good himself, regardless of how good he proved to be, he started out as the backup. If you said ahead of time this year, the 4-12 Cowboys last year will win 13 games at a minimum next year without Tony Romo, you'd be going, that is a hell of a coaching job by Jason Garrett. This is something that has been a long time in the making. You're big on leadership. You said it several times today.
Yes.
This is a guy that hired the right people in Scott Linehan and Rod Marinelli. This is a guy that put a leadership culture in. I don't know if you guys talked about it earlier in the week, but this player's creed. Locked all the team leaders in a room and said, you come up with the standards for this team. You come up with our 10 commandments. And they did. Getting buy-in from all the great players on that team to self-police, to self-enforce their culture. These are the things leaders do. They're not simply authoritarians with an iron fist at the top. They figure out ways to get players, even players in backup roles, to play at the top level. Jason Garrett is clear and away the Coach of the Year this year.
I will say that you are lucky that the fault that Jerry Jones has been accused of for years, liking guys too much, keeping them around too long, being buddy-buddy with someone, finally it has paid off for you and for Cowboy fans. Because how many years did you say, how in the world did Jason Garrett make $3 million as an assistant coach? How in the world is Jason Garrett still here as a head coach? Other franchises may be able to look at this and say, But to stick around for this long, you got lucky, and maybe he's turned into a really good head coach. But let's be honest. If Jason Garrett was any other team, he would have been gone a long time ago.
The award is for Coach of the Year. It's not who's the best coach in the NFL. It's who was the best coach this year. That's what the award is for. And you're right.
They got lucky.
It's a testament to process. It's a testament to process. You're exactly right. It's why both of us erred in not firing Rex too soon, not firing other coaches, like those we might mention now, too soon. You let the process play out.
Like I said, top 2.